Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to Jazz Congress. Welcome to Jazz Lincoln Center. My name is Ken Druker. I work at the Verve label group. We're the home to many, many Charlie Parker recordings. And I'm really happy that you could join us and this, frankly, incredible panel of musicians that we're fortunate to have with us this morning. Let me start by introducing everyone. First off, our first guest started playing professionally at the age of 19 in Detroit. He has toured all over the world with his own groups as well as with jazz greats, and this could go on forever, but Billy Eckstine, Lionel Hampton, Nat Adderley, Jay McShann, Phil Woods, Tom Harrell, Randy Brecker, James Moody, Dizzy Gillespie, and many others, and has recorded with many of those as well as Charles Mingus, Art Farmer, Kenny Drew, Toshiko Akiyoshi, Eddie Jefferson, and the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra with Wynton Marsalis. He is currently the resident composer of the San Diego Ballet. Please help me welcome Mr. Charles McPherson. Our next guest is a Grammy-nominated improvisational vocalist who has been featured on albums by such artists as Goldlink, Gregoire Marais, Terri Lynn Carrington, Omar Sosa, Steve Coleman, and Daphnis Prieto. He is a freelance music emissary with the U.S. State Department and chief ideator and co-creator of Beats and Beans, a discussion series on creativity, coffee culture, and reimagining of creative spaces. He is currently on the faculty of the School of Improvisational Music in New York. Please help me welcome Kokayi. Our next guest is a two-time Grammy winner with the band Living Colour, who has recorded, produced, and toured with such artists as Wayne Shorter, Pharoah Sanders, B.B. King, Mick Jagger, Harry Belafonte, that was a great duet, by the way, the Mick-Harry duet, Ron Carter, Salif Keita, Marcus Miller, Lauryn Hill, Paul Simon, Madonna, Stanley Jordan, and Public Enemy, among others. He is also an accomplished photographer and visual artist and serves on the advisory boards of the Bronx Music Heritage Center, creating a stimulus for new and alternative art concepts in the Bronx, and The Way of the Rain, a multimedia group paying homage to Mother Earth. Please welcome Will Calhoun. Our next guest has recorded over a dozen albums, including his acclaimed Bird Calls, and has worked with numerous artists, including Jack DeJohnette, Mark Dresser, Vijay Iyer, Danilo Perez, Arturo O'Farrell's Afro-Latin Jazz Orchestra, the co-led quintet Dual Identity with Steve Lehman, and another co-led quintet with Bunky Green. He has won numerous prestigious international accolades and awards, as well as a Guggenheim Fellowship and the Doris Duke Artist Award, and he is currently the Anthony H.P. Lee Director of Jazz at Princeton University. Rudresh Mahanthappa. And our final guest is a three-time Grammy Award winner who is a 2019 winner of the prestigious Doris Duke Artist Award. She has played with Herbie Hancock, Wayne Shorter, Dizzy Gillespie, Al Jarreau, Cassandra Wilson, Diane Reeves, the Yellow Jackets, Pharoah Sanders, Stan Getz, Esperanza Spalding, and countless others. She has released 9 albums, her newest one entitled Waiting Game, with her band Social Science, which has received worldwide critical acclaim. She is also going on tour with Rudresh this year, celebrating Charlie Parker, and we'll talk about that. She is currently the Zildjian Chair in Performance at her alma mater, Berklee College of Music, and is currently the founder and artistic director of the Berklee Institute of Jazz and Gender Justice. Please welcome Terri Lynn Carrington. I thought we would start with Mr. McPherson and his introduction to the music of Charlie Parker and the influence that Charlie Parker has had on him. Do you remember the very first time you heard the music of Charlie Parker?
Yeah, I do. I was a young tenor player, maybe a year or two older than I, told me about Charlie Parker and that I should check him out. So one afternoon, I'm in this little candy shop, and there's a jukebox, and I look on there, and there's Charlie Parker. I hadn't heard him before. I didn't know what he looked like or any of that. So I put my money in, and when I heard Bird, it was the name of the tune was Tico Tico, and it was part of a series of records Bird made with the Afro-Cuban theme. And so it was Tico Tico. And when I heard that, I was about 14, And for whatever, well, I know the reasons. It resonated immediately that this is it, and it just really resonated very much. And as I think back on it now, I would not have put it in these terms, but what appealed to me was the logic that I heard with Bird's, his choice of notes and his phrasing. Now, I had heard other jazz players before that were spectacular and wonderful. But the thing that struck me with Bird immediately, even at the young age of 14, was I would not have used these terms, but it's the linear logic and how he's able to speak in these very long, eloquent musical sentences and connect up the sentences seamlessly and with this flow of logic. And that, I heard that immediately, even though I would not have used those terms, because at 14, I wouldn't have chosen those words. But that's what, but I did know that this is it. And the thing that when I heard this, I said to myself, this is the way it should go, and what you should do, meaning me, is have your own notes. So you have your own notes, but the phrasing, being able to play these long, eloquent sentences, connect them seamlessly with this linear logic thing, this is the way to do it, and you have your own notes, which is going to give you your individuality. And then the kind of flawless technique, clean as a whistle, these are the things that you grab onto and just have your own notes. And at 14, that's what I said to myself. And yeah, so today, I'm still trying to find my own notes. And yeah.
One of the ideas of this panel is how the music of Charlie Parker has translated into, from the time he played it, and how other musicians from other genres and styles are incorporating some of the things that Charlie Parker did. Kokayi, we were talking briefly before about the long lines, the long melodic lines. For what you do, how has Charlie Parker's approach to music affected your work?
It was mostly about his, my introduction to Charlie Parker was sitting in the basement listening to records with my dad, right? Just all these jazz records. And the thing that brought me back to Charlie Parker in particular was Gangstar's Manifest, which sampled Night in Tunisia. And so I started to, I was like, yo, I remember that record from listening to it with my dad, and who is that? And so in the research, I started figuring, seeing how he practiced. And then in terms of what I do in hip hop, which comes from a historical space of wanting to innovate through hip hop music, and then as an MC, wanting to be able to innovate and be able to freestyle, come up with these things, vocally improvise. So Charlie Parker was heavily into improvisation, but he had to have a lexicon of language. So the hours that he practiced, the understanding of the notes and how those notes fit together, the depth of the material that he practiced, because it wasn't just jazz music, it was classical music, it was all sorts of different things that inspired him to practice in a specific way. So for me, I just wanted to be dope enough to be able to put these things together as seamlessly as possible, and then be able to improvise in that same manner, so that there are no, hemming and hawing, and that in my practice I put in the time, because I read that he would practice between 11 and 15 hours a day. And so if I'm going to be an artist of that aptitude or that magnitude and trying to make that much impact, then I need to practice the same in my own, work.
And is the rhythmic element of what he did what had the most impact on you, or is it really his entire body of work or the way he played overall?
Well, when I first began, I wasn't thinking about melody. I mean, I used to play saxophone in school and play piano, took piano lessons, but when hip-hop came around, I forgot all about instruments and everything else. And I just got into the words, like how can I say what I need to say, and how can I tell my story and tell the story of my people. And so rhythmically, I got into it because I was like, oh, how you do that? How do you triple that up over this meter? And how do you know, approach this, and how do you speak to these different things? And then as I practiced and worked more and worked in different constructs, then the idea of melody came in. And then how can I do this melodically? So not just the rhythm, but then the melodies that go along with it. So that has all informed what I do today.
And let's stick with Charlie Parker's rhythm because of the many innovations. Rhythm is foremost. Terri or Will, do you want to speak to what was new, if you can, about Charlie Parker's approach to rhythm and how it applies to what you do?
Was it new? Yes, very. It still is new to me. If I look at it sort of academically and I think about what Charlie Parker played, the note selection, and you look at the chord changes, and you look at the tempo he was playing the notes over, it's pretty remarkable as a concept of rhythm. You know, as we look at notes on the page, and we look at a time signature, and as drummers, a lot of times, we think about maybe 3 or 4 time signatures at once. If we hear 3, we still think 9 or 6 or 4 or 1, based on what the bass player is playing or based on what the saxophone player is gonna do. As drummers, we're already, because we have to make everybody happy. So we're already thinking ahead of the game in terms of how we want to set rhythm up. Charlie Parker's performance had all of those elements to it. It had humor, had genius, brilliance, double time, triple time. He was playing behind the time. So as a drummer, if you didn't even listen to what Charlie was doing melodically, the rhythmic analysis was brilliant. It made me think about how I want to play time even. Ride cymbal doesn't have to be right on time with the hi-hat. The kick drum could be flamming a little bit with the snare drum. Or don't play the hi-hat at all. He had this brilliant concept of leaving holes in music and filling in places where you would thought there was no space. So it was, rhythmically for me, it's still, his music and his solos are still a lesson in rhythm.
Well, I agree with everything that Will said. Also, as a teacher, I try to get all of my students, every player, the horn players, the rhythm section players, to really understand the rhythms of bebop and see them as universal phrases. You know, the phrasing is something that works in any genre. So sometimes when students play, and it doesn't, I'm trying to figure out what's wrong. You know, why does this not speak to me, or what's happening here? Often it's because of the phrasing, and there's, I don't hear it stop and start in places that, make sense. There's no breath, and so I get them to really dig deeper into the rhythmic phrasing of bebop and the melodic aspect too, but. And I make them play it in whether they're playing funk, fusion, Latin music, because the phrasing is great no matter how the rhythm is approached. So I always tell them a good phrase is a good phrase. But if you don't study the phrasing of bebop, there's a big hole in your playing, and it's audible. We can hear this hole. We can hear that you have not done that. And if you're going to be an improviser, you can't get away from doing that.
Do you find students coming in with even a basic knowledge of Charlie Parker's language, or is it generally something you're introducing to them at school for the first time?
Well, it depends on the student. I mean, you have a variety of students, and there's people from all over the world at Berkeley, and their history of jazz varies. So there are some people, that have studied some Charlie Parker. So we're then looking at, let's find the more obscure songs, or, everybody kind of knows certain heads, but then, take a deeper dive. So I think our job as educators is to always get them to take a deeper dive into something that they're just scratching the surface on. And with bebop, I mean, most of them are still scratching the surface on that. So, yeah.
Rudresh, at the time, this was called modern jazz, and I think we still think of it as modern jazz, but what is it about Charlie Parker music that is almost eternally modern? Why do we think of it that way?
Well, I think a lot of what we're talking about, you know, I mean, I think everything is modern about it. I mean, with regard to rhythm, I think, you know, what was interesting to me is that, you know, I think you guys touched on this, but where he starts a phrase and where he finishes a phrase and the variety of that, and the variety, the length of phrases is very much like the way people speak. It has this unpredictability, but it has this beauty to it as well, like any great orator has. And I think that's part of what makes, from the rhythmic standpoint, that's what makes his playing timeless. I also think, again, as a horn player, one of the things that he did that's very remarkable that I still hear very few people do is he would turn around the time and then come back. He would do that all the time. I mean, I used to turn around the time when I was young because I sucked, but but the way that he would play something that he would normally play on an offbeat, and he'd play it on the beat, and then he kind of compressed something to finish where he intended. I mean, that's really ingenious. There are very few people. I mean, it's almost like the way he was phrasing is the way Jack DeJohnette plays or something. Really very special. And then his melodic vocabulary was incredibly advanced. I mean, you have to consider that, you know, he wanted to study with Verve, right? And he was already listening to tons of Stravinsky and tons of Bartok. And, you know, I think it's very easy to take for the gifts he gave us for granted just because it's old. And when we talk about education, it's very interesting because, you know, students are always listening to their peers. You know, they're listening to the people that are like 10 or 15 years or 20 years older than them. And the old scratchy records from the 40s somehow are I don't know, not valid or they're just old. They're just dusty. They're not modern. And, you know, it's interesting to think that just because something happened a long time ago, I think that with younger folks, there's a tendency to think that we're doing everything better now. But the reality is no one plays better than Charlie Parker. So, you know, it never gets better. Maybe the vocabulary expands somehow, but it never gets better. But I remember, I started listening to Bird when I was probably 12 or 13. I used to listen to the Savoy 2201 with the Romance Without Finance and Red Cross. If you guys don't know those tunes, those are the best ones ever. And but I remember later in college working on Donna Lee with a student, and we were taking it phrase by phrase, kind of dissecting it. And looking at each phrase on its own without a rhythm section, it sounded as modern as Bartok or Schoenberg or something. It sounded like the most contemporary thing that's out there. And that's when I realized that you could recontextualize any elements of what he was doing, whether it was rhythmic, phrasing, melody, and any of that was going to be just as modern as anything that's happening today or anything that's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, I think with that, for me as a hip-hop musician and producer, I look at people like Jay Dilla, who would dissect and take apart records, but also go against the rhythm, not quantize the hi-hat, leave space. I think some of the best vocalists and MCs are those that leave space where you don't expect them to leave space and want to have that consistent movement so that it feels like they're telling the story. And that's a lot of times that's what you get out of the music as well, is that somebody's actually telling a story and you can understand that they have a firm understanding of not just their instrument, but kind of like of themselves and wanting to speak and have a particular voice and have a particular sound.
You know, and also, if I may, the Charlie Parker, if you think about anything that we do, and we're talking about music, I have a way of, there's such a thing called craft. And that means you have craft and then you have art. Now, craft is just the ability to conquer whatever the medium is that you're dealing with, and in our case, we're dealing with instruments or the voice, or we're dealing with that. So you have crafts, and that's in the three-dimensional, right here and now, time and space, and it's just mastering the physicalities of the drums, the saxophone, all of these things, and that's craft. Then you have art, which is a different dimension. Now you're dealing with humanity, and then so the reason why Bird was great is all the things that we've said, but this is very important. He was able to take craft, which means he totally mastered his instrument, the physicalities of it. He was clean as a whistle, the way he played. But his artistic part is what really makes him great, because he was multidimensional. With his craft, he was able to play the human condition, which means humans are complex beings. We're able to feel pain, great joy, mystery, sensuality. We have all these dimensions that make us human. Bird was able to, when it came to portray the human emotionality of deep love, he was great at that. He was one of the greatest ballad players ever. And this has nothing to do with notes or technique. It's got something to do with, are you as a performer and as an artist able to take any of the human emotions that we have and be able to put your vibe on it, your choice of notes, your phrasing, and your world view on that particular feeling. So when you deal with ballads, you're dealing with usually very deep love and usually unrequited love. It's not all a happy scene. Are you able to play that? That has nothing to do with A minor 7, D7, Lydian dominant. It has nothing to do with that. It's like, how are you going to use an A minor 7 to portray this particular emotion? When it came to that, Bird played ballads beautifully. When it came to the blues, which is a part of this music, he's one of the greatest blues players ever. When it came to swinging, well, he could really swing. When it came to playing sensuality. So basically, this person, at the age of early 20s, was able to play the whole human spectrum, the whole humanity, all the feelings that we have as people. He was able to actually do that with great technique. So when you have craft and technique, and you have inspiration, and they're holding hands, that's where genius is. Yeah. And that's why he was great, and this is somebody 22 or 23 years old. That's incredible, actually.
I like this fantastic point. I was going to chime in on a small point at my generation of Charlie Parker, because all of those things you mentioned are fantastic. I'm from the Bronx, grew up where hip hop began, but grew up in this town, and I was going to the Vanguard and going to the jazz clubs, the rock clubs, the fun clubs to check out music. But one of the things, when the 80s kind of hit and Living Color happened and Basquiat was still around and Spike Lee was just starting, there was this generation, it was like this kind of new thing sort of happened. Hip-hop labels, cats getting deals, attorneys that looked like you. The scene was changing. And one of the other impacts Charlie Parker had on us was he was this brilliant cat that didn't compromise. We felt like when we saw it, no disrespect to any other jazz musician, we felt like he's brilliant, he's great, he's in front of the stage, he's an intellectual, and he's not compromising. He's playing the music at the highest level with the saxophone in his hand, microphone in the front of the stage. And for us, that was like a Malcolm X, that's what we talked about, Chuck D and myself and KRS-One, and we talked about Bird's image outside of Bird's music. So I just wanted to tag that on to what you're saying, because there is that element where we saw him in that way, but we also were going through our artistic endeavors and changes at that time and trying to get our record deals and get ourselves off the ground. And he gave us the power to be an individual, have a voice, don't be afraid, don't sell out, say what you have to say, study your craft, be serious about what you're doing, and present it at the highest level possible.
Well, yeah, and then I don't want to just do all the talking, but just on that point right there, that particular vibe of excellence that you could see with Bird. Clint Eastwood, I was talking to him, and he saw Bird in the late 40s at Jazz at the Philharmonic. And he said when he saw Bird, everything that you just said about if there's some kind of magnetism that is exuding from this person, and it's thick, you can cut it with a knife, you can see it. Clint Eastwood told me when I saw that, it was just this confidence and this total control of the craft that he's doing. He said that this influenced my whole way of thinking about film and what I'm going to do. Was just looking at Bird on the stage, and there was something about him that made him say, this is it. When I'm doing my film, this is how I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to have this kind of vibe, this kind of confidence, and all of this. And he said it changed his whole life. Not the music or the notes, but just his vibe and his persona, which is pretty much what you're saying. So it's true, because there's a lot of people saying that.
Yeah, I want to chime in on that too. Just on the humanity aspect that you brought up, because my dad told me a story, and it's, what you just said made me think of it. Because people, most of us never, obviously didn't meet him, most of us. And, there's not as many, recordings of interviews and things that as there, are of some other people. But my dad told me this story. He met him, and it was a snowstorm. My dad lives in Boston, and there was a snowstorm. So my dad took a bus with his cousin through all of this snow, and it took him a long time to get there. And when he got there, the concert was canceled because of the storm. And my dad was very gregarious, and he figured out his way to get, he was about 14, figured out his way to get backstage, or just walk to the back of the venue, and he saw him leaving with Miles, and he said, man, Bird, you gotta play something for me, because I just, it took me 2 hours to get here through the snow. You gotta play something. And Miles said, come on, man, stop messing around with these kids. He stopped and talked to him. And Miles said, come on, man, stop messing around with these kids. And he said he pulled out his saxophone and stood outside in the snowstorm and played for him. And that just always, touched me. It was always, in the back of my head about the humanity aspect and the compassion that he had.
Yeah, I mean, there was clearly something about him personally, in addition, extra musically, that attracted musicians at the time and continues to attract people. The thing obviously everyone knows this, we're celebrating 100 years of Charlie Parker. He only made it to about 34 and a half. And the recordings cover not even 14 years. To think of all that compressed into that period of time is quite amazing. Does anyone, it's kind of a counterfactual game, but if he had lived, does anyone have any inklings or feelings about where his music would have gone in time?
Before we get too deeply into that, I like to just say that he did live, just as a grammatical change in the vibe. And when you look at time and spirit and energy and people and art, it happens in the time frame that it happens. I spent some time in the outback with these Aboriginal families, and I remember one of the older fathers was asking me, what is that thing on your arm? And I said, it's a watch. He said, how does it work? I said, it tells time. He said, how does it tell time? And I said, well, for example, I'm a musician, and if I want to have a recording session, I leave my house at 1 o'clock to get there at 3 o'clock, and we start the session. And he said, that machine gets everybody to the same place at the same time? So I took off my watch. And he said, young man, time is here, and everything in between. So a lifespan 34 may seem short in our numbers or in our years. And that's not to not to put any hindrance on your question, it's a brilliant question, but I just, since that experience for me, I think about time differently, and not necessarily in it being short, but it's everlasting, because we're talking about Bird right now. So, you know, and somebody's gonna find some bootleg from some recording from something that didn't come out yet that's gonna still come out, who knows? But it lives. That's the t-shirts we see, Bird lives. And that's the reality of that. So I don't like to think about it in that way, of it being short, because we're still studying it, and we're still in love with it, and we're still researching it, we're still talking about it. So for me, it's a living thing. But I can't imagine to answer your question, what would have happened after that, for me.
Stylistically, it was a relatively short time, and the style didn't, when we think of someone like Miles Davis or John Coltrane, who evolved musically over a short period of time as well, his style didn't change as much. Does anyone feel that he would have continued to play in the same style, or would his ears have been open as they were to other things that were going on musically at the time, or even have gone back further?
I mean, if you talk about somebody who's an innovator, innovators just continue to innovate. Like, there's no boundary. I couldn't imagine, you know, what could have happened, because there is no limitation to somebody who was already trying to push past limitations. So there's nothing off limits, whether that's punk, hip hop, go-go, classical. I mean, pick a genre, any genre. I really don't like to think of things in genre either. I mean, would it have been good music? I can guarantee that it would have been good music.
I think.
And he was so incredibly open-minded, so it could have gone. It really could have gone anywhere. I think.
Just like you mentioned, Edgar Varese.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now I've checked out Edgar Varese. I don't know if people, but anyway, if you've checked him out.
I mean, can you imagine what would have happened if he studied with Varese? That would have
So
been crazy,
Bird was totally
right?
wide open. You know, I don't want to usurp
that's
your
all I have
thing,
to
but
say.
yeah.
I mean, the only other thing I would say is that I feel like he played like a long life of music in a short period of time. So it's kind of like these things are, you know, we always think about his life being cut short, but it's, you know, it's like he lived 80 years and 34 years. So it's kind of weird to think about what would have happened if he lived longer. I don't know. Maybe that's a weird thing to say, but I've always thought that.
Mm-hmm. I know he didn't have, Bird was comfortable, to try to project what would Bird be doing in the future. But so if you think about what he did when he was here, there was no musical setting that he wasn't comfortable in. He played Afro-Cuban music beautifully. Some of those records he made with Machito and Chico Farrell and those people, when you listen to that, a lot of that stuff is one take. He's not only playing the charts and doing a good job of that, he's playing it like he owns it. Years ago in New York, there was a place where the Cubans used to dance. It was right down the street from Birdland. And all of the great Cuban musicians would play it, and people would dance. Well, Bird and Dizzy would set in with those people every time they got a chance. So when it came to making a record with those kind of rhythms, that kind of vibe, Bird didn't have to change anything about his phrasing for that. He could just play it, which is amazing. He was into European classical music. He knew everything about Stravinsky, Hindemith, Prokofiev. He was home there. He could be there. He could quote phrases from these particular works. He was there. Sheila Jordan told me that Bird was the one who told them, because a lot of people would hang out at Gil Evans's house in Midtown Manhattan. It would be people like Miles, Bird, Gil Evans, of course, and Jerry Mulligan, Sheila Jordan, people like that. And Sheila said Bird was the one that told them that you must learn more about other art, not just musicians. So she said that Bird could go in a museum and identify paintings by people. This is Marc Chagall. This is Miro. This is so he knew about painting. He knew about Western classical music. He knew about Afro-Cuban music. He knew about Hungarian folk songs. He was totally open. He had no barriers. He had no like this is bad, this is good. His mind was like a sponge. He could hear anything and then collect it here because he had almost like a photographic memory and audio memory. Plus he had what they call muscle memory. So Bird was blessed with a lot of natural stuff. But his memory, it was almost photogenic. And he could hear, and so he just was like all kind of musical information and everything else. Harold Land, great saxophone player, told me that when he would see Bird on the breaks, Bird would be reading books about quantum mechanics in the 50s. He was already into Max Planck and how matter behaves in little small pieces. And Harold said, I was amazed that Bird was more than just music. He had a worldview. He was like really what we call, say, a Renaissance person. He was totally that, and that's what makes a bird a bird. Yeah.
I want to, dare say that when I listen to the phrasing, I could see him diving into odd time signatures and things that are happening now. I could see him doing that if he had lived longer. And also harmony, because Rudresh and I are doing a Charlie Parker reimagined type tour coming up and this year. And I spent a lot of time, transcribing some of his phrases and licks and putting other harmony behind it. And it sounds incredibly modern, without changing any of his notes, changing the time signatures and harmony, and it sounds incredibly modern. And it made me think about how back then, jazz musicians were playing, he came up with all of this new melodic content and rhythmic flow, but the harmony was based on, standards and blues and music harmonically that had been written, before, and the certain way that the chords moved. So I envisioned a whole nother harmonic concept coming from him if he had lived longer. That's just my own fantasy, but I'm pretty sure that some of those things would have happened.
Maybe electronics too.
Like what?
Maybe electronics too.
Oh, yeah.
He said maybe electronics too.
Had a question. We were talking, Rudresh mentioned something before about the way he spoke, or if you heard an interview, and we were discussing before one of the few interviews that Charlie Parker did with Paul Desmond, and the similarity, listening to Charlie Parker speak and kind of mapping that to his playing in a way. Has anyone heard that interview? And can you?
Yeah, I love that interview. I listened to it a ton of times. Yeah. And he's incredibly humble in that interview too, because Paul Desmond is asking him it's kind of like, what's it like being you? What's it like having changed music? And he's like, I didn't change anything. I'm just here doing what I do, and it's pretty amazing. But just when he spoke like the way he played, it has that same sort of charisma and that same sort of lilt and nuance and complexity. I think a lot of people play like they speak, but I think it's always interesting to hear, some of the greats actually, talk about what they do.
No, I agree that he played like he spoke. If you listen to any interviews with Charlie Parker, he spoke in these long, well-connected sentences. There's not one there's no stoppage. If someone asks him a question, I don't care what it is, then the answer is going to be this very long, eloquent, well-said, perfect grammar sentence with not one hesitation ever. And he nails the point, whatever it is, and that's it, and period, end of sentence. Now, some of the most brilliant people are not able to speak like that. You know what I mean? To have that kind of control, and to be able to do that. That's like oration being. You know, that's what speakers that really know how to do that. And he had that, and he played the same way. These long, beautiful lines, perfectly linear. The linear logic is spot on, and the grammar and all that is great. End of sentence, boom, that's it. And I did see Bird when I was about 15 years old in person. And yeah, this animal magnetism that we're talking about, he definitely, it was thick. He definitely had that. And so yeah, he was a very, very charming, without actually trying to be. He didn't, you know, he didn't seem to, he had a different kind of ego, because I could tell he did, when his presence was, the way he's acting, and even though people are staring at him, he's acting the same way he would be if he were in a room by himself, which is very interesting, because about what he's saying, how he's looking, he's acting as if he's in a room by himself. And these people are staring at him, and he's just very natural. And that's a very charming thing to see. I didn't know what to call it at 15, but now it's just this animal magnet. It's the same thing that Clint Eastwood saw. What you were talking is just this real confident self-assuredness without being loud or egotistical. It was just this quiet confidence, and he definitely was the king. I mean, it was like you could just around him. I remember Teddy Edwards, a musician, great saxophone player, that was a friend of Jimmy Heath, walked into Jimmy Heath's house one time, and he said this: "I can tell Charlie Parker's in the house." And he was. Bird was in the house. And basically what he meant, the whole vibe of the house and everybody in there was different because Bird was there. That's the first thing he said: "I can tell Bird's in here." So this is what I'm talking about. It's a very interesting thing about him. I think he was a special, not just a great musician, great saxophone player. I think he might have been really what you'd call a great soul, because he was not he was a multi-dimensional person. He was interested in everything, and he had this mixture, which is interesting, of street, because he's definitely a Kansas City street guy, mixed with book learning. So here's a guy who's definitely from the streets, but he can talk about quantum mechanics in the same breath. That's a hell of a combination, you know what I mean? And he was able to just be all of that.
One of the things you're talking about there, I think for those of my colleagues up here who are teaching, it's important for students to know about that. To not to be one-dimensional, not to get into one style of playing or one type of behavior. If we're going to be artists and we're pushing this music forward, I think as educators, and for those of you who are booking shows or presenting art, it's also a fantastic idea to have this concept Bird had to sort of spread the word on that kind of a thing. Because what often happens is, and we all went to music school, or some of us did, and you know, you have to pick a lane. Terri and I, classmates, Terri, Lynn, and I, you know, she knows me at Berkeley. I was a little bit of a rebel up there because I didn't want to pick a lane. You know, I was like, oh, you know, well, it was challenging for me to leave the Bronx and then come up to Boston, and all of my friends from the Bronx were getting record deals, and the ones that weren't, I saw on late night TV playing with all the big rock stars, and I was eating cold Chinese food. So, you know, I had to kind of figure out like was I going to go back home, and you know, but the reality of it is, I believed what you said there, Charles, is that, you know, that's not my situation. My situation is Boston. I got to tough it out. I have to find out what it is, what my voice is, and what I want to do. But I think it's really important for students in this fast, quick pace, quick results, immediacy culture to slow down a little bit and widen the lanes up to choose some things, because this immediacy gets us to make these knee-jerk decisions about music and about people and about art, which sometimes punishes the art, in my opinion. So that comment, I just wanted to say that because I don't see enough of that. I'm not a full-time teacher. I do clinics and residencies, but when I talk to the students, that's one of the things I want to talk to them about is being open, being like you. Now, we didn't have YouTube. You know, we couldn't look at Philly Joe and Max's drum technique. We had to listen to the record and put it. Terri and I, we were in the room. We were trying to wait. No, that was a flam. No, wait, it was a triplet. Wait, we had to play it back, figure it all out. Now that the students can look at it and see the person and get more information. So with that knowledge and with this technology, it can't be abused. It has to be used in a way where we benefit from it.
I just want to say that, the challenge with that is, because I think that most great artists do study, they read books. I don't know how you can be, if we look at all of the really great artists, that there is a common thread with that. And I think, I encourage them to read as many biographies as possible on these artists so they can really see what it takes, other than us telling them, because they don't necessarily want to listen to us. So, that's true. So we read the biographies, but I think that the problem is with education is they have so much to do, and they're trying to accomplish so much in such a short period of time because it's become so competitive, and everybody's better in certain ways at their craft at a younger age, that they're in this competition, this race, to get through school and to just be better and better at, just playing their instrument, that they don't have the time. So I don't think it's till after they graduate, really, and then they start actually exploring these other areas of life and, become artists. You know what I mean? So what you're saying is absolutely correct. I just think that it's damn near impossible for them to do it while they're in school. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's that point where you reach it's craft versus humanity, right? And I think that's what's missing a lot of times is if you're an artist, if you're in that competitive space, then you're not thinking about being a human, and you're not even thinking about the humanness in your playing. You just want to technically be sound. But that's when you hear records. You hear records that are really technically sound, and you don't feel nothing from them. It's just like watching math being written on a chalkboard. It's like, oh, that's a dope formula, but I'm feeling nothing, right? And so that's a lot of the work that starts to come out of these spaces is really, really technically sound. And for those that appreciate technically sound music, is great. But some of us like the imperfection in music. And I think that's what you get with Charlie Parker is the humanity being placed within the music.
But with perfection.
But with perfection, right? No, that's what I'm saying. So it's the imperfection of the human that's in there, right? But the perfection of the work and the craft, but the humanity that's put into it. Like you said, he could play a ballad and you would cry, right? There are certain people that can sing a song and you're gonna cry immediately as soon as you hear their voice. Not just from the fact that they're hitting the right note, but you can feel that they were probably crying in the studio when they did it.
And the people that transcribe, there's a lot of people that play bird licks, right?
Right.
It just doesn't sound as good.
Right, right.
That's because you got to really mean it.
Right.
Yeah, and then see that's another reason why Bird was great, because he really meant it. The act of to get in that other world, this great space that we all want to be in as performers. This alpha zone. This is where things play themselves. That spot right there is a particular brainwave. It's a particular attitude of mentation. And it's very funny. It has nothing to do with the egoic sense. It has nothing to do with conscious mind. It has nothing to do with the ego. It basically, to get the best and to reach the collective unconscious where all the knowledge is already there, belongs to everybody. to connect to that, your egoic sense has to shut up and sit over here and watch it happen. Now, to get to that, that's an act of humility. It's not an act of war. It's an act of humility, meaning that you're saying, I'm an open vessel, help, give it to me. I'm open to receive. That's what that is. Now, Bird definitely was able to tap whatever that is. And if you're able to tap that space, that allows you not to be a slave to your empirical experiences, gender, what century you were born in. You're tapping into some universal knowledge that has nothing to do with three-dimensional time and space. Has nothing to do with that. And so therefore you can play beyond yourself. Now the way I know Bird was into that, somebody asked him, Bird, what are you thinking about when you play? And the person relating the story said, Bird got a thoughtful look on his face and thought for a few seconds and said this, you know, I'm playing and I look down at my hands sometimes and I'm surprised that it's me. So to me, that speaks volumes. This guy is able to switch this spot that I'm talking about at will and tap this other source of knowledge. And sometimes he looks at himself and he's surprised that it's him doing it. That means something else there's a control that's happening, and his egoic mind is not there. It's just letting it happen. As an artist, that's hard to do, because we all know that the minute that we're performing, we're concerned about, is the room full? Is the man making money? How do I look? Is my coat okay? Are my pants okay? How's my hair? You got all this stuff, right? And what's the read about? And the cork is not. So you got all these, it's very human, but you got all these distractions. To be able to bypass that and just be pure consciousness and receiving this stuff that I'm talking about, that is, after your craft has become to a certain level, that's the game in town, is how to get the best out of yourself.
That's a spiritual place.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we don't often talk about Charlie Parker and spirituality.
Right.
But that is a spiritual place, to be in the complete presence and then to become an observer.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's a beautiful story to talk about, his spirituality.
Yeah.
I just want to add, one of the things that has always struck me and continues to strike me is and we touched on it earlier, is the amount of humor and joy in his playing. I think for somehow large sectors of this art form became humorless, and I think academia had a lot to do with that. And there's almost like a sense that
Say
that you can't be funny or humor. If you're funny or humorous, you're not taking what you do seriously. But Bird was someone who was incredibly humorous, but clearly took what he did seriously, So I that's something that I've always tried to kind of, exude in my playing too, just like joy and humor. I mean, I think humor is an amazing one. I mean, there are a lot of people that play mournfully, and there are a lot of people that that can evoke like a certain narrower spectrum of emotion. But that sheer joy, like when you hear him play, I'm in the mood for love, I mean, nothing makes me I can be completely down, but if I hear that particular track, that makes me realize that everything's going to be okay. And I think there are very few people that can do that. And then on the spiritual level, one of the things I've always contemplated is, there's always this, in most histories and mythologies, there's this sense of like a new ages or new eras or new recreating of environment is often signaled by trumpeting, like, Gabriel playing the trumpet. And, I've always had it in the back of my head that Bird was trumpeting in a new era of sorts. And, in the way that, his impact is timeless, I would say arguably unlike no other on this music. And it was almost as if he brought us something that changed the landscape and continues to.
Yeah, I mean, if we look outside music culturally, you know, from the Bird Lives graffiti that came up to Basquiat using his name and tunes, and is this why Charlie Parker sticks around aside from the music? Is it this authenticity, this connection to something greater that we all feel when we hear his music and learn more about him?
Yes, I think so. Yeah. And for all of us, it makes no difference what we're playing, what we're doing, if we're dealing with words or whatever, is that Bird is like, he is a symbol of just this, like where craft and art are holding hands. And it's almost like that yardstick and being true to that yardstick, it doesn't make any difference what you're doing. It means that you're doing what your craft is, you're spot on, and how you're executing, and then your worldview as a person is involved in it also, and then you do. And it doesn't make any difference how you play or what you play. If that's the yardstick, then that basically it's a yardstick of excellence that's covering time and space, art and craft, and humanity. What a wonderful yardstick. And that's what you're supposed to get from Bird. You don't have to play like him. But if you have that kind of, what would you call, ethic, that's it. That means I don't care if you're making pizza. Right. If you're doing it like Bird, that means you're making a pizza and it's great and you're throwing it up in the air and it's spinning. You got chops to do this. Right. And the pizza is looking good. You look good while you're making it and you're creative. That's it. It doesn't make any difference what it is.
But you also, in that, you change the game on how pizza's made.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the other thing. That's the thing. I think people that get remembered throughout time are those that came into this specific space and then changed how everything went. They just disrupted. It wasn't a person that just went with the status quo and went with how it's supposed to be. Right? And I think that's when you hear that through music and through art and through film and through literature, is people that come in and say, I hear you, and I know that these are the rules and this is the margin, you know, and everything, but I'm writing. I ain't even on your paper. Like, I'm going to just do something totally different. But don't ask me to write a paper, because I'll kill your whole vibe on the paper. But I'm going to just push that to the side and do this.
Yeah.
You know?
And all it is being yourself.
Right.
That's all it is. It's being yourself. Now, this had nothing to do with Bird. This is Thelonious Monk. I heard somebody ask Monk, where did you get your originality and all of this stuff? Because Thelonious Monk is really seriously original. And Monk, a man of few words, looked at him and said, you, meaning the person asking the question, are a genius just because you look like yourself. Now that seems like, well, what kind of statement is that? And basically he's saying, just because you're here and you look like that, there's your genius and your originality right there. Difference between me and you, I've dug deep to get in contact with that, and then I use it, and maybe you haven't. And that's really true. And so when we talk about innovators, a lot of these people are not innovating because it's a conscious thing. Right. Or let me innovate. Right. And then that's not the way that's not the way it happens. Usually it doesn't. It happens just because you are you and you're not lazy, and then you do what you want to do with a passion. And it might be, it's going to be different because you are who you are. It took millions of years of evolution for you to be here in this time and space. All you have to do is be the best of yourself and hit it. That's it.
And not be afraid to.
No, you got to have the courage, and you cannot be lazy. That's you must do. Right. And then innovation comes from you just doing it. Let the world think you. Let them be the ones to say, "Oh, he or she innovated." You know, they can say, "Well, all you need to do is do what you do, whatever it is you do, with the passion and the chops of Charlie Parker." And you'll be one. You'll be great basketball player. I don't care what it is, cook, chef, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the only challenge with that is, I mean, 'cause I'm sure there are a lot of geniuses that we don't know about. You know, that have done that. So the challenge is you can do that, but you can't expect to, like you said, nobody's going to say, I'm going to innovate right now. But you can do that, what you're saying, but you can't expect to be recognized for it. You know what I mean? You can't expect anything in return, especially when you add racism and sexism to the picture. Then you really have, you have to do this because you want to, it worked for him and it worked for many others, but there's so many people that it doesn't, work for as well. So it's like all of these things that, are considered. I wish it was as easy, to do it and then be able to give that to the world. But there's, so many factors about how you can, be supported and be accepted. And, so sometimes you have to go make the pizza.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
But you must do. I mean, yeah, you got to do it in whatever,
It's a powerful point, Terry. It's, I guess the remarkable side of it is what he did with the environment surrounding him. I think that's what separates the scenario. It's the environment and you deciding on what role you're going to take in the environment that surrounds you. He made certain decisions where he wanted to become Charlie Parker. Thelonious Monk made certain decisions where he wanted to be Thelonious Monk and so on. And that's the thing that I live with the most with Bird is what he did is very important, but I think it was how he did it and the environment that he did it in. That was not a fantastic time for African Americans in America.
Absolutely.
That was not a fantastic time to even be a jazz musician. There was great music happening during that time, but politically there was some dark things going on. So there's these other elements of the surroundings, Terry brought up, whether it's gender, time, and space, and how people think about things, that has an impact on those decisions that you make and how you're influenced and how you're innovating. And the hardest part, a lot of times, is being able to put those things aside to be able to tap in. But Bird is the person that did it. There's a few others too, but that's the hardest part, the fearless side of just grabbing the rings.
And like you said, it's thankless, right? It's thankless. It's not something that you do hoping that you're going to get the accolades, because a lot of people that we consider geniuses now, while they were in existence and when they were at that time, people was calling them failures, and only then after did they go,
We have a few minutes if there are any questions. People would like to come down. There's some microphones here. If you could come down to the microphones, that would be great.
Question, but I would like to give a comment, if I may. For starters, I just want to say it's an opportunity for me to inhale the exhale of you masters, so thank you so much. My name is Carrington Griffin. I am Director of Community Engagement and Public Programs at the American Jazz Museum in Kansas City. Oh, wow. And we have an opportunity to educate children, as they were talking earlier, about Charlie Parker. Our biggest group has been 438 children. So just imagine trying to teach them about Charlie Parker. One of the good outcomes that we had, I am the storyteller there as well, and I talk about jazz. And I'm honored to talk about Charlie because I grew up on the same street that he did, which was Olive, and the other one was Penway. But I also went to the exact same elementary school and the high school he went to. So I wish schools, especially in Kansas City, would honor him more. His home has an estate and people love to go to his home. And a lot of people are not aware that we house his plastic Grafton saxophone and his contract from May 15th, 1953. So when children come, I talk to them about Charlie. So Charlie is very much alive, because anytime I get through telling a story about Charlie Parker and a young child goes home and his mother emails me back and say, my son went home and made himself a plastic saxophone out of PVC piping, that means that Charlie is well alive, and the little boy's name was Charlie as well. In conclusion to that, we've had 3 young men that started at the American Jazz Museum, and they play in the Blue Room. All 3 of those young men got a full ride to Berkeley. So I think that is a great opportunity. And I just want to leave a quote, because I didn't know he was an artist, so thank you for sharing that. But I want to leave one of his quotes that I share with everybody who comes into the museum. Now I can say why. Quote, unquote, art. When you don't, or let me make sure I get it right, art. Art is your own experience and your own thought. If you don't do it, it won't come out your horn. So again, I just want to tell you guys thank you. This was a great opportunity for me to share about Charlie Parker and one of my classmates. Thanks.
Hey, thank
Do you mind if I raise this for, actually, it's pretty hot. Hi, my name is Christian Wiggs. I'm from Austin, Texas. I just wanted to ask you guys a question. I was so thankful that you touched on recording music and kind of the balance between wanting to make something that is super killing and technically proficient and also having something that speaks to you and it is not void of emotion. So obviously, you know, with Bird, there wasn't a note out of place, and it all sounded very concise and very beautiful. But then also, you know, you'll hear people like Monk or Miles or Clifford Brown. Like, those recordings have obviously some mistakes in it. And I know that kind of comes from, you know, only having limited studio time and just trying to get those out and wanting to keep it fresh and new. But I'm curious, in our age where we can kind of just let, you know, it's not a tape anymore, right? Sometimes we can just like press record and take as many takes as possible. With all of you in your individual experiences with recording, how do you strike that balance between wanting to make sure that it is our, you know, innate want to make something that's technically proficient, like we said, like at the, you know, academia level, but also not beating it to a pulp to where we're getting all of the emotion sucked out of it?
2 quick answers so someone else can talk. Number one, you got to play in front of people. You have to get some kind of, whether it's your grandmother or it's your siblings, you have to have, I think, some kind of a human response. You don't have to believe what people are saying to you, but it's good. It's a good kind of, in my opinion, mirror for you to check yourself too, and check the number one. Number two is, you know, Charles talked about some really heavy things about spiritual. You have to feel it. And when you feel it, you don't have to explain it. So the line is also trusting yourself and saying, you know, this feels good to me. And you have to roll with that. And you'll know as you drive that car down the road if you're being innovative or not. I think you'll kind of figure that out. But just that's my quick response to that.
Yeah, I do think recording the way it is now has made people lazy, so it's kind of to the point that you really don't know how somebody plays until you hear them live. I mean, it's a sort of, I mean, it's possible that that's, you know, you just don't know about their consistency. Because a lot of people have moments of, you know,
Genius.
yeah, being a genius, but it's you know, fleeting moments, you know, so to, you know, just like you said, just keep playing in front of people is really important. Make live recordings if that's what you're trying to do.
I'm a tech geek, so I will noodle too much. So I try not to noodle too much. That's the first thing. I don't think everything needs to be perfect. So I try to limit the amount of takes I take. That's one. Two, get yourself an older mentor. Because old people will tell you exactly what it is. Because at a certain point, they just don't care about your feelings. Like, they're not going to care. So I would say you got to sit under somebody that's not your friend, that's not your age, that knows how to put their instrument together, knows how to take it down, ate ramen noodles, you know what I mean? Live some life and give you some, because that part of this music tradition is like being the griot in a village. It's like that, those stories aren't coming down to you if you're just talking to people that are 10 years out of your age group. Like, you need those stories from way back so people can give you that real honest emotion and that real feeling. Because sometimes you be in your feelings too much. Like, you're like, oh, I feel bad because somebody said no. It's like, oh, you heard no? I heard hell no. And then I heard expletive no. So it's like you understand it. So that's what I would say.
Just really quick, I'd say anything more than 3 takes doesn't really feel good anymore. So if you listen to your the voice in your head saying this doesn't feel good, you should probably stop.
Sure.
The other thing I would say is just to kind of humanize things a little bit, there was a double CD that came out last year or the year before that's all like Charlie Parker outtakes and false starts. And I highly recommend listening to that because you can really see kind of the human aspect of him just like really screwing up, but it really sounds great anyway. You know, like him, like, you know, literally 5, 15-second tracks of false starts. You know, it's definitely worth checking out.
Thank you for your questions. I'm really sorry some of our panelists do have to get going. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and your time with us. And thank you for joining us today.